The year was 2347, and humanity had spread across 14 colony worlds scattered throughout the galaxy. Earth remained the heart of human civilization, home to 12 billion people who lived their lives believing that the universe was big enough for everyone. They had been wrong. Admiral Catherine Moore stood on the observation deck of Orbital Station Arcturus, watching cargo ships drift slowly toward the Mars shipyards. She was 62 years old, with gray hair pulled back tight and a face that showed for decades of military service. The view always calmed her. The endless dance of ships and stations against the black canvas of space. Lieutenant Daniel Price rushed onto the deck, his young face pale with fear. "Admiral, we have an emergency transmission coming in from the Kepler colonies." Catherine turned away from the viewport. "Show me." The holographic display flickered to life in front of her. A young woman appeared on the screen, her face covered in ash and dried blood. Behind her, buildings burned against an orange sky filled with smoke. Screams echoed in the background. "This is Governor Patricia Hayes of Kepler 44-B," the woman said, her voice shaking. "We are under attack. Unknown vessels appeared in orbit 3 hours ago. They gave no warning. They made no demands. They simply started bombing our cities. We have counted over 2 million dead already. We have no military ships here. We cannot defend ourselves. Please, someone help us. Please." The transmission turned to static and disappeared. Catherine felt ice spread through her chest. "Get me Central Command immediately." Over the next 6 hours, similar distress calls flooded in from 3 more colony worlds. Each message told the same terrible story: ships appearing without warning, cities burning, millions dying. The attackers finally identified themselves as the Vorath Dominion, an ancient civilization that had watched humanity's expansion across the stars with growing hatred. The Vorath message was broadcast across all human frequencies. Their leader, a creature whose face looked like a nightmare of scales and teeth, spoke in a cold voice that had been translated into human language. "Young species, you have spread too far and too fast. You have claimed worlds that belong to elder races. You have taken what was not yours to take. Now you will pay the price. Surrender all your colony worlds. Return to your single planet. Accept permanent quarantine within your solar system. Refuse, and we will burn your Earth until nothing remains but ash and memory." The United Terran Council called an emergency meeting. Politicians from every nation on Earth gathered in the Great Chamber, arguing and shouting over each other. Some demanded immediate surrender to save what remained. Others called for negotiation, believing that reason could prevail. Military advisors stood before screens showing the terrible mathematics of the situation. The Vorath fleet numbered over 40,000 warships, each one more powerful than anything humanity possessed. Admiral Moore sat at the far end of the chamber, listening to the chaos. When the council president finally called for her assessment, she rose slowly from her seat. The room fell silent. "They believe we are soft," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. "They have watched us for years. They have seen us choose peace over war, diplomacy over force. They believe that because we did not build weapons, we cannot fight. They believe that because we chose kindness, we are weak." She paused, looking around the room at the frightened faces. "They are wrong." Councilman Gregory Palmer shook his head. "Admiral, please be realistic. Our combined fleet barely reaches 8,000 ships. Their fleet is 5 times larger. The mathematics simply do not work in our favor." Catherine smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Then we will have to change the mathematics." She requested a private meeting with the council president and the heads of the military. In a secure room deep beneath the council building, she told them about something that had been humanity's darkest secret for 200 years. Project Lazarus, she said, activating a holographic display that showed massive underground facilities hidden across the solar system. It was started by our ancestors who feared that expansion would bring us into conflict with hostile species. They built automated factories in secret locations. For 2 centuries, these factories have been working in silence, constructing a fleet that we hoped would never be needed. The council president stared at the images with wide eyes. "How many ships?" Over 13,000 warships, fully armed and ready for activation. And that's not all. Catherine changed the display to show vast chambers filled with cryogenic pods. They also froze volunteers, military veterans who agreed to sleep for as long as necessary, waiting to be awakened if humanity ever faced extinction. Why was this kept secret from the Council? Because the fewer people who knew, the safer the secret remained. The founders believed that if we ever needed this fleet, it would be in a moment of absolute desperation. They were right. Word of the Voroth attacks spread across Earth like wildfire. People gathered in the streets, watching news feeds that showed their colony worlds burning. Fear gripped the planet. Parents held their children close. Lovers clung to each other. The old prayed while the young demanded answers. But something else began to stir beneath the fear. Something that had slept in the human heart for generations of peace. Anger. Not the hot, quick anger of a moment, but the cold, deep anger of a species that had built civilizations, survived ice ages, and crossed the void between stars. The Voroth had made a terrible mistake. They had poked a sleeping giant. Recruitment centers that had been nearly empty for decades suddenly overflowed with volunteers. Factories that had produced consumer goods began converting to military production. Scientists who had spent their careers studying stars and planets now turned their minds to weapons and defense systems. Admiral Moore watched these developments from her command center, receiving reports from across the solar system. The Voroth fleet was still advancing, destroying everything in its path. They had 3 months, maybe 4, before the enemy reached Earth. "It's not enough time," said Lieutenant Price, studying the production reports. "Even with Project Lazarus, we can't match their numbers or their technology." "We don't need to match them," Catherine replied. "We need to surprise them." The Voroth have conquered 11 civilizations. Every single one of those species fought the same way, defensively, desperately, and predictably. We will do something different. What? Catherine turned to face her young officer. "We will make them believe we are exactly what they expect. Weak, scattered, terrified. We will let them advance toward Earth with complete confidence in their victory. And then, when they are deep inside our solar system, when they believe the war is already won, we will show them the truth." She looked out at the stars, somewhere beyond which the Voroth fleet drew closer with each passing hour. "We will show them what happens when you threaten humanity's home." The game had begun. The stakes were everything, and Earth was about to remind the galaxy why humans had survived when so many other species had fallen. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a facility that existed on no official map or record, Admiral Catherine Moore walked through corridors that had not felt human footsteps in over 100 years. Emergency lights cast long shadows on walls covered in dust. The air tasted old and recycled, like breathing history. Dr. Samuel Kent walked beside her, an elderly man who had spent his entire career as the caretaker of this forgotten place. He was one of only 12 people in the entire solar system who knew about Project Lazarus. "The founders built this place in 2142, Samuel explained as they walked. They had just made first contact with 3 alien species and realized that the universe was more dangerous than anyone had imagined. They started construction in secret, using automated systems to avoid any information leaks. They reached a massive door that required both of their handprints and voice confirmations to open. As the door slowly swung inward, Catherine caught her breath at what lay beyond. Ships. Thousands of them. Stretching into the darkness of an underground cavern so vast that she could not see its end, row after row of warships stood in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming under the emergency lights. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time, monuments to human engineering and human fear. "How many in this facility?" Catherine asked. 5,200 vessels. Combined with the 7 other hidden sites across the solar system, we have just over 13,000 ships ready for activation. Samuel paused. Every single one has been maintained by automated systems. They are as ready for battle today as they were the day they were completed. Catherine walked among the ships, running her hand along the cold metal hull of the nearest one. And the crews? Samuel led her to another section of the facility, a chamber even larger than the ship bay. Here the walls were lined with cryogenic pods, thousands upon thousands of them, stacked in rows that reached toward the ceiling. Each pod contained a frozen human being, sleeping a dreamless sleep that had lasted decades or even centuries. Veterans, Samuel said quietly. Every single one of them volunteered for the Lazarus Protocol. They knew they might never wake up. They knew that if they did wake up, everyone they loved would be long dead. They accepted this sacrifice to protect a future they would never see. Catherine stopped before one pod, reading the name displayed on its frame. Commander Lucas Bennett. Born 2089. Frozen 2147. He had been sleeping for exactly 200 years. What kind of person volunteers for this? She murmured. The kind who loves humanity more than they love their own life, Samuel replied. Catherine made her decision. Wake them. Wake them all. The awakening process took 3 weeks. Across Earth and its orbital stations, ancient warriors opened their eyes to a world that was completely foreign to them. They had gone to sleep in an age of uncertainty and fear. They woke up in an age of peace and plenty, only to learn that peace was about to end. Lucas Bennett was one of the first to awaken. He sat in a recovery ward, his body wrapped in warming blankets, while medical machines monitored his vital signs. His muscles ached from 2 centuries of stillness. His eyes hurt from lights that seemed too bright. His mind struggled to accept that everything he had known was gone. A young nurse named Maria Santos approached him carefully. Commander Bennett, how are you feeling? Lucas looked at her with eyes that had seen another century. I feel like a ghost. Tell me what happened. Tell me why I was awakened. Maria explained about the Voroth attacks, the destroyed colonies, the ultimatum. As she spoke, Lucas watched images on a holographic display showing cities burning and people dying. His hands began to shake, not from the cold of cryogenic sleep, but from a rage that had been frozen for 200 years. Show me everything, he said when she finished. I need to understand these Voroth, their tactics, their weaknesses, their psychology. I need to know my enemy. Across the solar system, similar scenes were happening. Men and women who had sacrificed everything for a future they would never see now found themselves called upon to save it. The psychological evaluations were concerning. Many showed signs of disorientation and grief. How could they not? They had lost entire worlds, entire lifetimes, to the cold sleep. But there was no time for gentle healing. The Vorath fleet drew closer every day. Admiral Moore assembled her command staff aboard the newly awakened flagship Endeavour. The ship was 200 years old by construction date, but it had never seen battle. Its systems were untested, its weapons never fired in anger. It smelled of machine oil and potential. The Voroth believe they face a scattered, unprepared species, she told her officers. They believe their superior technology makes victory certain. We will teach them otherwise. Commander Bennett spoke from his seat at the table. Admiral, many of my people are struggling with the adjustment. 200 years is a long time to be gone. They're grieving for people who died generations ago. I understand, Catherine said softly, and I wish I could give them the time they need. But the Voroth are already moving toward Earth. We have perhaps 6 weeks before their main fleet arrives. She looked at each face around the table. I'm asking you to fight for a world that moved on without you. I'm asking you to die for children who never knew your names. Can you do this? The silence in the room was heavy. Lucas thought about his wife, who had lived a full life and died an old woman while he slept. He thought about his daughter, who had grown up without a father, had children of her own, and passed into history. He thought about all the generations that had come and gone, building the world he had just woken up to. Yes, he said finally, we can do this. We didn't give up everything just to quit now. One by one, the other officers nodded their agreement. Catherine felt something loosen in her chest. Then let's get to work. The training began immediately. Lazarus veterans had to learn new technologies while teaching younger crews. The brutal tactics of war that had been forgotten during the long peace. Simulators ran day and night. Ships that had never flown practiced formations in the darkness behind Jupiter. Communication networks were tested and improved. Lucas threw himself into the work. It was easier than thinking about what he had lost. Every hour spent planning was an hour he didn't have to remember his wife's smile or his daughter's laughter. The past was gone. Only the future mattered now. Maria Santos, the nurse who had first spoken to him, transferred to his ship as a medical officer. She found Lucas on the observation deck late one night, staring at the stars. "You should be sleeping, Commander," she said. "I slept for 200 years. I think I've had enough rest." He didn't look away from the viewport. "Do you know why I volunteered for Lazarus?" "Why?" "Because I was afraid. Not of dying. Of failing. I was afraid that humanity would face a threat we couldn't handle, and I wouldn't be there to help." He finally turned to face her. "Now that threat is here, and I intend to make sure my sacrifice meant something." Maria studied his face, seeing the pain hidden behind his determined expression. "You're not alone, Commander. Everyone on this ship, everyone in this fleet, we're all fighting for the same thing. And what is that?" "Home," she said simply. "We're fighting for home." Lucas nodded slowly. For the first time since awakening, he felt something other than grief and anger. He felt hope. The fleet was almost ready. The trap was almost set. And somewhere in the darkness of space, the Vorith were sailing confidently toward their doom. The Vorith's supreme commander stood on the bridge of his massive warship, watching the stars slide past the viewport. His name, translated roughly into human language, meant "he who burns stars." He had earned that name by destroying 3 civilizations in his long career. Humanity would be the 4th. His body was covered in dark scales that shimmered under the bridge lights. His eyes were black pools that reflected no emotion. When he spoke, his voice sounded like stones grinding together. "Status report," he demanded. His tactical officer bowed low before responding. "Supreme Commander, the human colonies have gone silent. Our occupation forces report minimal resistance. The surviving humans are scattered and disorganized." As expected, Supreme Commander allowed a thin smile to cross his reptilian face. Prey animals always freeze when the predator strikes. It is their nature. What of their homeworld? Long-range scans show increased activity around their orbital stations. Small patrol groups are moving through the system, but nothing that poses any real threat. Their fleet is fragmented and weak. The Supreme Commander nodded with satisfaction. The humans had been promising once. Their rapid expansion across the stars had impressed even the elder races. The Dominion Council had briefly considered offering them an alliance. But the Supreme Commander had argued against such foolishness. Young species were like weeds, he had said. Cut them down early, or they would spread everywhere. Continue the advance, he ordered. We will reach their Earth in 32 cycles. I want their orbital stations destroyed first. Let them watch their defenses burn. Let them understand how helpless they truly are. Then we will deal with the planet itself. The Vorath fleet moved forward, 43,000 warships arranged in perfect formation. It was the largest military force the Dominion had ever assembled against a single target. The Supreme Commander considered it overkill, but the Council had insisted. Better to crush the humans completely than to leave survivors who might seek revenge. What the Vorath sensors could not detect. What no scanner in their fleet could reveal. Was the truth hidden in the shadows of the solar system, behind Jupiter's massive bulk? 13,000 Terran warships waited in darkness. Their engines were cold. Their weapons were silent. They drifted like ghosts, hidden by the gas giant's enormous electromagnetic field. Crews worked in whispered tension, checking systems, running calculations, preparing for the battle that would decide humanity's fate. Admiral Catherine Moore deployed her forces with careful deception. Small groups of ships made themselves visible to Vorath scanners, fleeing in apparent panic whenever the enemy approached. Each retreat reinforced what the Vorath wanted to believe. The humans were weak. The humans were scattered. The humans had no real defense. Meanwhile, the true fleet gathered in the darkness, waiting for the moment to strike. Deception is an art, Catherine told her commanders during their final strategy meeting. The Voroth expects us to fight like every other species. They've conquered. Desperately. Defensively. Predictably. We will do none of those things. Commander Lucas. Bennett studied the holographic battle map, tracing the Voroth approach with his finger. The asteroid field approach is risky, Admiral. If they detect our main force too early, we lose our only advantage. Then we make sure they don't detect us. Catherine highlighted a series of positions along the enemy's path. We'll use our smaller, faster ships as bait. Hit-and-run attacks to keep their attention focused forward. By the time they realize where our main force is hiding, it will be too late. The plan required perfect timing and coordination. Each ship captain received detailed instructions, but also the freedom to adapt to changing situations. This was humanity's hidden advantage. The Voroth military worked through rigid hierarchy, with orders flowing from the top down. Individual captains had no authority to make independent decisions. Human doctrine was different. Trust your people. Give them a goal. Let them find their own way to achieve it on the night before the battle. Lucas walked through the corridors of his ship, the Resolute. He stopped at every station, speaking with crew members, learning their names and their stories. Many were Lazarus Vitae. Rands like himself, people who had lost centuries to the cold sleep. Others were young recruits who had joined after the Voroth attacks, their hearts burning with fury and fear. One young woman caught his attention. Her name was Olivia Grant, and she worked at one of the secondary weapon stations. She was barely 20 years old, with short dark hair and eyes that held too much pain for someone so young. "First battle?" Lucas asked her. She nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she checked her equipment. "Yes, Commander. I keep thinking about Kepler Colony. My grandmother was from there. She escaped before the attacks, but everyone she knew, her whole community." She trailed off, unable to finish. Lucas placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I understand. When I went into cryogenic sleep, I left behind a wife and a daughter. They lived full lives while I slept. They grew old. They died. I'll never know if they were happy. I'll never know if they forgave me for leaving." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "But I also know that I made a choice to protect something larger than myself. That's what you're doing now? Whatever happens tomorrow, remember that." Olivia straightened slightly, drawing strength from his words. "Thank you, Commander. Don't thank me yet. Thank me after we've won." Across the fleet, similar conversations were happening. Old veterans shared wisdom with young recruits. Captains gathered their crews for final briefings. Engineers ran last-minute checks on weapons and engines. Pilots practiced attack runs in their minds, visualizing every maneuver. Admiral Moore made a final broadcast to all ships. Her face appeared on screens throughout the fleet, calm and steady as always. "In a few hours, we will face the greatest threat humanity has ever known. The Voroth believe we are weak. They believe we are afraid. They believe this war is already won." She paused, letting her words sink in. "They are wrong. We are not the same species they studied from a distance. We are not scattered, helpless prey. We are the descendants of people who crossed oceans in wooden boats. We are the children of those who survived ice ages and plagues and wars that nearly destroyed us. We have been knocked down 1,000 times, and 1,000 times we have stood back up." Her voice grew stronger. "Tomorrow, we will show the Voroth what that means. Tomorrow we will teach them that Earth does not surrender. Earth does not bend. Earth fights back." The fleet responded with cheers that echoed through metal corridors. Lucas Bennett returned to the bridge of the Resolute and settled into his command chair. Through the viewport, he could see nothing but darkness. Jupiter's bulk blocked the distant sun, leaving the fleet in shadow. "All stations report ready," his first officer announced. "Good." Lucas looked at the crew around him. Young faces. Old faces. Faces full of fear and determination. They were counting on him to lead them through the fire. He would not let them down. "Send a message to the Admiral," he said. "The Resolute is ready for war." One by one, similar messages came in from across the fleet. 13,000 ships crewed by people who had everything to lose and everything to fight for. The trap was set. The bait was in place. Now they just had to wait for the enemy to walk into it. The Supreme Commander would learn soon enough that humanity's peaceful nature had been a choice, not a weakness. And choices could be changed. The Vorath fleet dropped out of faster than light. Travel at the edge of the human solar system. 43,000 warships hung in the void like a wall of death stretching across the darkness. At the center of the formation, the Supreme Commander's flagship glowed with power. Its shield strong enough to withstand nuclear weapons. Begin final approach, the Supreme Commander ordered from his throne-like chair. Destroy any resistance you encounter. Leave their homeworld intact for now. I want the humans to watch their orbital stations burn before we deal with the planet. The advanced fleet pushed forward into the solar system. They encountered exactly what they expected. Scattered human patrol ships fled before their superior numbers. Occasionally, a brave captain would attempt a desperate attack, only to be destroyed within seconds. The humans were behaving exactly as predicted. The Supreme Commander watched these minor skirmishes with boredom. The humans are even weaker than our projections suggested. At this rate, we will reach Earth orbit in 12 hours. Yes, Supreme Commander, his tactical officer agreed. The resistance is meaningless. The Supreme Commander settled back in his chair and closed his eyes. Wake me when we arrive. You should not have slept. 6 hours into the advance, a Vorath destroyer on the edge of the fleet exploded without warning. The ship simply vanished in a ball of fire with no weapon signature detected. Then another destroyer exploded. Then 3 more in rapid succession. Port. The tactical officer screamed, his scales turning pale with shock. What is happening? Unknown cause, sir. We are detecting no weapons fire. No missiles. It is like they are being destroyed by invisible hands. Humanity's first surprise was a new class of stealth missile. These weapons had been developed in secret and never used until this moment. They traveled without engine thrust, carried through space by carefully calculated gravitational paths that made them invisible to standard detection. Each missile carried a warhead powerful enough to crack open a destroyer. The Supreme Commander woke to chaos on his bridge. Alarms screamed. Officers shouted at each other. On the tactical display, red markers showed ships disappearing from the fleet. How many lost? He demanded. 217 vessels, Supreme Commander. The attacks are continuing. We cannot find the source. Find whatever is doing this. Destroy it. But before the Vorath could reorganize, the second surprise emerged. From behind Jupiter, from within asteroid fields, from hidden positions around every gas giant. 13,000 Terran warships revealed themselves. They did not charge blindly forward. Instead, they formed into a crescent formation, blocking the Vorath path to Earth while leaving their own flanks seemingly exposed. Admiral Grez. Catherine Moore's voice broadcast across all frequencies in both human and Vorath languages. This is Admiral Catherine Moore of the United Terran Navy. You came to our home expecting prey. You found something different. Your fleet is now surrounded. You have one chance to surrender. Take it. The Supreme Commander's response was harsh laughter transmitted on the same channel. You think numbers alone will save you? Our technology is superior in every way. Our weapons are stronger. Our shields are thicker. This changes nothing. I hoped you would say that, Moore replied. Then she cut the transmission. The Battle of Seoul lasted 14 hours. The Vorath had better shields, better weapons, and faster ships. But they had never fought an enemy that treated each vessel as an independent mind within a larger body. Human captains anticipated each other's movements without needing orders. They covered each other's weaknesses and exploited every gap in the enemy formation. Commander Lucas Bennett led a strike group directly into the heart of the Vorath fleet, targeting their command vessels. The Resolute took heavy damage almost immediately. Primary weapons were destroyed. Half the crew died in the first 2 hours, but Lucas refused to retreat. All available power to engines, he ordered through gritted teeth. If our weapons won't work, we'll ram them. Ensign Olivia Grant, bleeding from a wound on her forehead but still at her station, managed to bring the secondary weapons back online. Commander, I have partial targeting capability. If we can get within 2 kilometers of the flagship, I can hit their bridge. Then get us there. The Resolute screamed through the chaos of battle, dodging fire that should have been impossible to avoid. Around them, other human ships saw what Lucas was attempting. Without orders, without coordination, they moved to support him. A corridor opened through the Vorath formation as Terran. Vessels sacrificed themselves to buy the Resolute a few more seconds. The Supreme Commander saw the lone human ship racing toward him. Destroy that vessel. Every weapon on the flagship turned toward the Resolute. Beams of energy tore through its hull. Explosions ripped through its corridors. Lucas felt the ship shaking apart around him. Olivia, now. At the last possible moment, with the Resolute literally falling apart, Olivia fired. A single concentrated burst struck the Supreme Commander's flagship directly in its command section. The explosion was visible from Earth. Without their leader, the Vorath fleet fell into confusion. Their rigid command structure became their greatest weakness. Captains who had never made an independent decision in their entire careers now faced a swarm of human ships that adapted to every move. Fear spread faster than orders could be given. The perfect formation broke apart. By the 14th hour, the Vorath fleet had been reduced to less than 8,000 vessels, and those survivors were fleeing toward the outer solar system at maximum speed. Human casualties were severe. Nearly 4,000 ships had been destroyed or disabled, but the Terran Navy remained operational. Admiral Moore watched the retreating enemy on her tactical display. Her face showed exhaustion and grief for all the lives lost. But there was also fierce pride. All ships cease pursuit, she ordered. Secure our wounded and begin rescue operations. One of her captains protested through the communication channel. Admiral, we could finish them. If we let them escape, they will return with more ships. They will return regardless, Moore said quietly. But not today, not tomorrow. Today we have shown them something they never expected to see. Let them carry that memory back to their masters. Let them tell the Dominion what happens when you threaten Earth. The Resolute drifted in space, barely holding together. Over half its crew was dead. Lucas Bennett sat in his command chair, surrounded by bodies and debris. Olivia Grant was somehow still alive, though she had lost consciousness from blood loss. A rescue shuttle docked with the crippled ship. Maria Santos was the first medic aboard, rushing to treat the wounded. When she found Lucas, he was staring at nothing, his hands still gripping the arms of his chair. Commander, Lucas, can you hear me? He blinked slowly, as if waking from a dream. Did we win? Yes. Maria gently checked his injuries. Yes, we won. Lucas looked at the destruction around him, the cost of victory. Doesn't feel like winning. It never does. Maria helped him to his feet. But your people saved Earth today. Your sacrifice meant something. As the rescue shuttle carried the survivors away from the broken Resolute, Lucas watched through a viewport as the distant shape of Earth came into view. Blue and green and white, beautiful beyond description. Home, he had been frozen for 200 years to protect that world. Today, he had nearly died for it. And if necessary, he would fight for it again tomorrow. The first battle was over. But the war had just begun. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Sol. The solar system was still filled with debris from destroyed ships, both human and Vorath. Memorial services were held every day for the thousands who had died. But humanity had survived. Earth remained free. Admiral Lucas Bennett stood on a hill overlooking San Francisco Bay, watching the sun set over the Pacific Ocean. He had been promoted after the battle, a recognition of his actions that day. The title felt strange to him. He still thought of himself as the young commander who had stepped into a cryogenic pod 200 years ago. The city below him had not been touched by the war, but everywhere he looked, he saw evidence of change. New defensive installations were being built along the coastline. Recruitment centers overflowed with volunteers. The sky was filled with shuttle traffic as supplies moved between Earth and the orbital shipyards. The stars, once seen as a frontier, of wonder were now viewed as a direction from which threats might come. Maria Santos climbed the hill to stand beside him. She had transferred from medical service to military command, one of millions who felt called to protect what had almost been lost. Her uniform was new, but she wore it with growing confidence. "You're quiet," she said. "I'm thinking about the future." Lucas watched a military shuttle rise from the bay, climbing toward orbit. "We won this battle, but the war is far from over. The Vorath will return, probably with allies. We've made ourselves a target for every hostile species in the galaxy. Are you afraid?" Lucas considered the question seriously. He had faced death many times during the battle. He had watched friends die around him. He had made peace with his own mortality long ago, before he ever stepped into the cold sleep. "No," he finally said. "I'm not afraid. I'm angry that we have to fight at all. I'm angry that the universe couldn't just let us exist in peace." He paused, searching for the right words. "I'm also hopeful. Hopeful. When I went into cryogenic sleep, I wasn't sure humanity deserved to survive. We were fighting among ourselves, arguing over resources, letting our worst impulses control us. I volunteered for Lazarus because I believed we might be better someday, but I wasn't certain." He turned to face her. "When I woke up, I found something different. I found a species that had learned from its mistakes. It had built something worth protecting. It came together when it mattered most." He looked back at the sunset, the sky painted in shades of orange and purple. "That's worth fighting for. That's worth everything." Across Earth and the surviving colonies, similar conversations were happening. The war had united humanity in a way that centuries of peace had not managed to achieve. Old rivalries between nations were set aside. Resources were pooled freely. Scientists who had competed against each other now worked side by side. The threat of extinction had burned away the petty divisions that had always held the species back. The United Terran Council transformed from a weak diplomatic body into a true government. Admiral Catherine Moore was appointed as Supreme Military Commander, the first person to hold such authority over all human forces. Her first act was to establish the Deep Space Defense Network, a series of monitoring stations that would provide early warning of any approaching threat. Her second act was to triple the capacity of the orbital shipyards, beginning construction on new warships that would not just match Vorath technology, but exceed it. Humanity had captured several enemy vessels during the battle, and their technology was being studied and improved upon. "We were caught unprepared once," she told the Council in her acceptance speech. "Never again." The Lazarus veterans who had survived the battle became heroes and teachers. Their experience with the brutal tactics of old warfare proved invaluable. Offering strategies that had been forgotten during the long peace, they trained new generations of officers. They helped design better weapons. They carried the weight of their sacrifice with quiet dignity. Lucas was given command of the newly formed Rapid Response Fleet, positioned to be the first line of defense against future attacks. He chose his officers carefully, mixing Lazarus veterans with young talent. Olivia Grant, fully recovered from her wounds, became his chief weapons officer. Maria Santos served as his second-in-command. The crew of the destroyed Resolute became legends. Stories of their final charge against the Vorath flagship spread across human space. Children played games where they pretended to be the brave officers who had saved Earth. Songs were written about their courage. Monuments were built to honor their memory. But perhaps the most significant change was philosophical. Before the war, humanity had approached the galaxy as explorers and traders, seeking knowledge and friendship. Now they understood that the universe was not merely indifferent to their existence. There were species out there who wanted them dead simply for being different. This knowledge did not make humanity bitter or cruel. Instead, it clarified their purpose. "We will not become conquerors," Admiral Moore declared in her address to the rebuilt orbital station Arcturus, broadcast to every human settlement. "We will not become the monsters who attacked us. But neither will we be victims. Humanity will stand as a guardian. Any civilization that approaches us in peace will find welcome and friendship. Any that approaches in war will find the same fate as the Vorath." In the depths of space, far from Sol, the surviving Vorath commanders returned to their homeworld with news of their defeat. The Dominion Council listened in disbelief. How could such a young species, barely out of their home planet, defeat the mightiest fleet in the quadrant? Some council members demanded immediate revenge. Others counseled caution. The debate lasted for weeks, but gradually a new understanding emerged. The Vorath had made a critical error. They had seen humanity choose peace and assumed it meant weakness. They had seen rapid expansion and assumed it meant recklessness. They had seen a lack of military development and assumed it meant inability to fight. What they had not seen, what no scanner or analysis could reveal, was the steel that ran through the human spirit. The willingness to sacrifice everything to protect home and family. The capacity for both forgiveness and righteous fury. The stubborn refusal to surrender even when all hope seemed lost. Earth had not been helpless. Earth had been waiting. Lucas Bennett stood on the bridge of his new flagship looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, enemies were planning their next move. Somewhere out there, other species were watching humanity with new eyes. Wondering whether this young race might become a threat or an ally, he thought about his wife. Dead for nearly 2 centuries now. He thought about his daughter, who had lived her entire life never knowing if her father's sacrifice had meant anything. He thought about all the generations that had come and gone, building and dreaming and hoping. "Commander Grant," he said quietly. "Status report." Olivia looked up from her station. "All systems operational, Admiral. The fleet is ready." "Good." Lucas settled into his command chair, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "Maintain patrol pattern. Keep your eyes open. The Vorath aren't the only threat in this galaxy." Maria Santos stood beside him, watching the stars with the same thoughtful expression. "Do you think they'll come back, eventually, or someone else will try their luck?" Lucas allowed himself a small smile. "But we'll be ready. That's the thing about humans. We adapt. We survive. We fight back." The fleet moved through the darkness, 13,000 strong and growing. Behind them, Earth turned slowly in the light of its sun, blue and green and beautiful. 12 billion people went about their lives, knowing they were protected. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was not a species to be conquered or contained. When pushed, when threatened, when backed against the wall, humans did not surrender. They fought back, and now the universe would have to deal with the consequences. The stars waited. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Earth was awake.